Hello, nice to see you again. Dujun City is an autonomous prefecture in Guizhou Province, China, a place with beautiful scenery and a relatively peaceful pace of life. In February 2010, just before the Lunar New Year, the city's tranquility was disturbed to be a gruesome murder. A sack containing a headless body is discovered in a river, opening up a lengthy investigation with countless complex details, unexpected suspects and an unexpected truth. So how did the casa go that year? Now please, follow this case with us. One morning in May 2010, environmental sanitation workers from Dujun City were doing their daily cleaning work along the banks of the Jiangjiang River. When they reached the area below the Rainbow Bridge, a famous bridge that spans the city center, they discovered a white woven sack floating on the water. At first they didn't pay much attention because people still occasionally threw trash into the river. But many days later, the sack was still there, not floating away. It seemed to be very heavy and caught on something below the river. Realizing something was wrong, a worker decided to report the incident to the police. Upon receiving their news, police quickly arrived at the scene. They proceeded to salvage the sack ashore. As soon as the bag was brought up from the water, investigators sensed something was wrong. The bag was very heavy and from inside a pale red liquid began to ooze out, staining the entire area of ground. The bag is about 100 centimeters long and about 60 centimeters wide. The string tying the bag's mouth was tightened when the policemen carefully untied the knot and lifted the sack. What was revealed inside was a red wool blanket. And when the last layer of wool blanket was opened, a horrifying scene appeared before everyone's eyes. Inside was the body of a man, but the head was missing. The victim was not wearing much clothing, just a shirt and a thin layer of pants. His hands were tied behind his back with rope, a clear sign of restraint per his murder. The forensic doctor conducted a preliminary examination. At this, there were many signs of struggle on the victim's body, indicating that he had had a fierce struggle with the perpetrator. The right chest area has a very deep wound caused by a sharp object. Perhaps this was the fatal wound that took the victim's life based on the condition of the body. The forensic doctor determined that the victim had been dead for more than 2 days. The case was immediately identified as amateur with a particular malicious nature. The perpetrator not only acted cruelly but also deliberately cut off the victim's head and put it in a sack and threw it into the river. The purpose of this behavior is very clear, making it difficult to identify the identity, thereby prolonging the investigation time and creating an opportunity for him to escape. Identifying the victim became the top priority, but the sack contained no personal belongings other than the body. Investigators could only rely on the external characteristics of the body. The victim was a man about 40 years old, about 1.60 meters tall. One very noticeable detail is his hands. The hands are very rare with many thick calluses. This is a characteristic of a person who regularly does heavy manual labor. There was a watch on the victim's wrists, but it was a very cheap electronic watch worth only about 20 to 30 yuan. These details paint a portrait of a farmer or a migrant worker in difficult economic conditions. Police conducted a large-scale search both banks of the Jiangjiang River in hope of finding the victim's head or other evidence. But to know, Rainbow Bridge is a bustling central area of Dujun City. There are many shops and shopping areas around. Police said the fact that the killer chose such a crowded place to dispose of the body suggests that the first crime scene was likely in the immediate vicinity. The killer did not want to move a body too far for fear of being discovered, but who could be so cruel to a pure worker? What was the motive for the crime? Is it due to personal grudge or love conflict? A series of difficult questions were posed to the task force, while the only clue they had was a headless body. Faced with a headless body and no identification papers, the investigation team of the Dujun City Police Department faced an extremely big challenge. Under the direction of Deputy Director Tong Qin Thao, the first direction of investigation was determined to make full use of the public security surveillance camera system. He determined that Rainbow was a central location. The purpose to move such a heavy body bag here, he must have gone through routes with cameras. Investigators began a meticulous job, which was to review image data from cameras installed at intersections and routes around the Rainbow area. During that time, the victim was most likely to have been disposed of. After many hours of hard work, their perseverance paid off. On a videotape caught the special attention of an investigator. Their footage was recorded at around 2 a.m. on the floor at an intersection about 200 meters from the Rainbow. In the quiet night, a man's figure appeared due to poor camera quality and low light. The image was very blurry, unable to see the face clearly. But this person has a very distinct identity. He looks a bit hunchbacked. This hunchbacked man is pushing a bicycle, the back of which is a white woven sack. Very similar in size and shape to the sack containing the victim's body. The bag seemed so heavy that the man had to use all his strength to move it with great difficulty. His behavior was also very unusual. At 2 a.m. the streets are deserted. Why would have to push aside a heavy cargo bike instead of cycling? All these details made the mysterious hunchbacked man the suspect in the case. While the police were trying to track down the hunchback news of the discovery of a headless body and the rainbow quickly spread throughout the city, causing a great deal of panic among the public. A few days later, a man took the initiative to go to the police to report. He said that after hearing about the case, he was extremely worried about his cousin, Ngo Keen, who had been missing for more than 2 days. He said that Mr. Ngo Keen had never turned off his phone or been out of contact for so long. Even if his phone runs out of battery, he will quickly recharge it and call his family after just an hour or two. The fact that he wasn't reachable for 2 days made his family suspect that something bad had happened to him. Investigators immediately showed this person photos of the victim's clothing. The man recognized the clothes as looking quite similar to what his cousin usually wore. Buth was unsure about their cheap watch on the victim's wrist because the body had no head. Photographic identification was impossible. However, this is still an extremely important clue. The police decided to conduct an investigation into the missing man named Ngo Keen. They quickly verified that 30-year-old Ngo Keen and his wife were running a noodle shop in Dujun City. One detail that particularly caught the investigators' attention was that just 2 days before he went missing, someone saw Ngo Keen having a huge argument with another man near the Rainbow area. Following this information, the police identified a man who had argued with Ngo Keen. His name is Kubo Bin, 35 years old, delivering noodles to restaurants, including Ngo Keen's restaurant. All attention turned to Kubo Bin. He had altercation with the possible victim shortly before the person went missing, and more importantly, when the police got to Kubo Bin's image, they noticed that his body shape, and especially his slightly hunched posture, were very similar to the hunched man in the surveillance camera footage. Kubo Bin was immediately summoned to work at the police station. Kubo Bin initially appeared quite evasive. He said he did not know Ngo Keen, then admitted that he did. When shown the camera footage, he finally admitted that the person in the video was him. Buth explained that the sack in the car was not a body butcher's noodles he was delivering to a regular customer. When asked about the identity of that customer, Kubo Bin refused to answer, saying he did not want to bother his customer. Thievish attitude, contradictory testimony and refusal to provide an alibi have caused suspicion towards Kubo Bin to reach its peak. Investigators increasingly believe that he is closely related to Ngo Keen's disappearance. They hypothesized that due to some conflict in business or personal matters, Kubo Bin murdered Ngo Keen. At 2 a.m. he used a bicycle to carry the victim's body in a sack disguised as a bag of instant noodles and brought it to Cow Rainbow of it. The case seems to have found the culprit, with the identification of Kubo Bin as the hunchbacked man in the surveillance camera footage and his previous conflict with the missing person Ngo Keen. The investigation team believed they were on the right track, although Kubo Bin explained that he was only delivering thick goods. His steadfast refusal to reveal the identity of the mysterious customer made his every word unreliable. Investigators decided to detain Kubo Bin for further questioning, while also conducting a deeper investigation into the relationship between him and Wu Zheyan's family. To find out the motive for the crime, the police returned to the area of the restaurant of Mr. Ngo Keen and his wife, and secretly took statements from the surrounding neighbors. This time, when asked specifically about Kubo Bin's this family, a few people provided extremely important information. They said that Kubo Bin seemed to have very strange expressions. He often visited Mi's shop not only to deliver goods but also to talk and approach Ngo Keen's wife. In particular, he often chose times when Ngo Keen was away to appear. This behavior has made many people suspect that there is an illicit relationship between Kubo Bin and Ngo Keen's wife. This information was like the final piece of the puzzle that helped the police build a complete and seemingly very reasonable crime scenario. It is very possible that Kubo Bin and Ngo Keen's wife had a secret affair. Ngo Keen was extremely angry after discovering the incident, leading to a big argument between the two men near the Rainbow. In order to be able to freely interact, his lover Kubo Bin had the idea of eliminating Ngo Keen. He lured the victim to a deserted place, murdered him and disposed of the body. His refusal to disclose the client's name in his statement was most likely a to conceal and protect this lover, the victim's wife. This hypothesis explains all the mysteries from the motive for the crime, previous conflicts to the suspect's shady behavior. The investigators returned to the interrogation room. This time they confronted Joe Bioping directly about his relationship with Wu Jian's wife. Faced with sharp questions and indeniable indirect evidence, Kubo Bin finally had to admit that there was a special relationship between him and Ngo Keen's wife, but despite to the affair, Hestel insisted that he did not kill Ngo. The task force was now in Adelaide. They have a suspect with a clear motive, present at the crime scene and with conflicting statements, but they had no confession nor any direct physical evidence to convict him. The identity of the headless body has not been 100% confirmed. Through the end, the murder weapon has not been found. Just when the investigation was at a standstill, an unprecedented and strange incident occurred, causing the entire situation of the case to change in an unexpected way. Deputy Director Tong Kandao suddenly received a strange phone call when he picked up the phone. A mocking and slightly drunk male voice came from the other end of the line. "You're looking for me, aren't you? I was killed, under the rainbow. Do yak know I'm calling you from the old world." These strange and somewhat prosy words made Deputy Director Tong extremely surprised. Is this a malicious joke here, a provocation from the perpetrator? The forensic team immediate number. The resulted that this phone number was registered under the name of Ngo Keen, who is believed to have been murdered. Investigators immediately asked Ngo Keen's family to repeatedly call that number back after many times of no answer. Finally, someone picked up, and on the other end of the line, the person talking was none other than Ngo Keen. He was still alive. A few hours later, Ngo Keen was at Thepli station. He explained the whole thing. It turned out that when he discovered his wife was having an affair with Kubo Bin, he had a huge argument with his wife in a fit of anger. He left home and turned off his phone so that no one could disturb him. When he turned it back on, he heard from his family that the police were investigating his disappearance and suspected he was the headless body found in Still angry and a little drunk, he thoughtlessly called Thepolis to tease them. The truth has been revealed. The entire investigation to Wu Jian and Zhou Beoping turned out to be ruse. Wu Jian is not a victim, and Zhou Beoping, despite his unethical behavior, is not a murderer. He was immediately released. The task force wasted a lot of time and effort following a completely wrong line of investigation. After the disappointment and somewhat humiliation the investigators had to return to the starting line, the case is now even more mysterious than it was at first. Who was the headless body found in the river, and who was the hunchback man who actually pushed Shed bicycle carrying the body that night? All back to Zaro. Ngo Keen's case was finally cleared up, but it pushed the investigation into the headless body case back to square one. The task force wasted its precious first days following a completely wrong line of investigation. Now they have no victim's identity, no suspects, and the only clue is a blurry camera footage of a hunchbacked man. Faced with a deadlocked deputy director, Tong Jontamat a bold decision to launch a large-scale search along the Jiangxia River. He ordered the local irrigation company to open the sluice gates. OFA dam upstream to significantly reduce the river's water level. He hopes that, as the riverbed dries up, they might find the victim's head or other important evidence that Theokla may have thrown away. A force of hundreds of police was mobilized. They conducted a geodetic search along both banks of the River, turning over every stone and examining every bush. The work is extremely hard and stressful. After many hours of fruitless searching, when Averion was almost exhausted, a working group made an important discovery in an area called Longmengku. Here they found another woven sack stuck in the reeds of the shore. The sack was quickly brought up. Inside was not the victim's head as they expected. But it was extremely valuable evidence. There was a bloody knife and a set of clothes that were also soaked with blood that had turned dark brown. In addition, investigators also found 2 small pieces of paper hidden in the shirt pocket. Even though it had been soaked in water for a long time, the writing on the paper was still quite clear because it was wrapped in a thin layer of plastic. Evidence was immediately teletaken to the forensic department. DNA testing results showed that the blood on the cloth sand on the knife completely matched the DNA of the headless body. This knife was identified as the murder weapon that caused the fatal wound on the victim's chest. However, on the murder weapon and clothes, the police did not find any fingerprints or biological traces of the murderer. All attention was now focused in the 2 small pieces of paper. Deputy Director Tong, a man with a lot of experience and of local customs, immediately realized the meaning of these 2 pieces of paper. A piece of paper containing a list of people's names along with contact phone numbers. The remaining piece of paper was a list of names along with amounts of money. Mr. Tong believes this is most likely a book of money donated, a party or wedding. In fact, this is the golden key to identifying the victim. It is very possible that these names and phone numbers are friends and relatives of the deceased. The task force immediately began the meticulous task of calling each phone number written on the piece of paper. Every call is made with care. The investigators explained that they were investigating a case and needed to verify information about a man. They then described in detail the victim's features as binge about 40 years old, about 1.60 meters tall, with muscular hands and wearing a digital watch. After many fruitless calls, someone finally got on the other end of the line who recognized these characteristics. The man said the description sounded very similar to Azamian. He knew name Cao Tu Pham from Majiang district, a neighboring district of Dujun city. This valuable clue took the investigation to a new turning point. A working group immediately set out for Majiang district to verify that they had found the familiar of a person named Cao Tu Pham here. When investigators presented events such as the victim's clothes and watch, his wife and family members burst into tears. They confirmed that these were indeed high-class items. The wife said that her husband was an immigrant worker who had been working in Dujun city for a while. He recently said that he is sharing a room with a fellow countryman to Sabi money. To be able to confirm with final certainty, the police took DNA samples from the noble's family members for a comparison. The subsequent forensic results confirmed 100% that the headless body found under the rainbow is a high-class scholar. After many days of investigation with wrong directions, the victim's identity was finally revealed. Identifying the victim opened up a complete line and much more specific direction of investigation. Police now know who the victim is, where he comes from, and what his connections are. The most important information they got from the victim's wife was that Cao Tufam was sharing a room with another fellow countryman. Who is this fellow countryman? Is he the mysterious hunchback man in the surveillance camera footage? And what is the relationship between the two of them? All these questions become the focus of further investigation. The identification of the as a high-ranking official gave the investigation a very clear goal. Finding his mysterious roommate, investigators returned to Thaishabi boarding house located on a hillside in Dujun city. The homeowner was once again invited to come to work. When you've shown a photo of the victim, he confirmed that it was Cao Tufam, one of the two people who rented the room. When asked about the other person, the landlord said he did not know his real name but clearly remembered an important identifying feature. He had a hunch. This detail perfectly connects with the image of the man sleeping in the surveillance camera footage. Police can now be certain that the person who pushed the bicycle carrying the body during the night was the victim's roommate. The forensic team conducted more comprehensive and thorough examination of the approximately 6.7 square meters rented room, although the perpetrator had cleaned up very thoroughly. Using professional measures and specialized chemicals, they discovered many bloodstains left on the floor and walls. DNA testing later confirmed that all of these bloodstains belonged to the victim. There was no doubt that this small rented room was the first scene of the crime, where the victim was murdered. The urgent problem now is to determine the identity of the hunchbacked roommate. The working group once again returned to the victim's hometown in Marjiang district. They sought out villagers who had also worked at the capital in the hope that someone would know about this man, and their persistence paid off. A fellow countryman said he knew the person who shared a room with Cao Tufam. That person was also from the same village, had a hunchback, and was named Cao Tupun. Not only did he identify the suspect, this fellow countryman also with information about the potential motive for the crime. He recounted that just a few days before the incident, at a dinner gathering, a fellow countryman, Cao Tufam, stood up and called on a variant to contribute money to a party in his hometown. At that time, Mr. Cao Tufam said that he had no money to contribute. Hearing that, Mr. Pham did not hesitate to mock and criticize Mr. Fong as a poor and stingy person. Not only that, Mr. Pham also took that opportunity to claim the 200 yuan debt that Mr. Fong got borrowed from him before. Being humiliated in front of a crowd, Cao Tufang was extremely angry and ashamed. An almost perfect suspect appeared, named Cao Tufang, with a hunchback in a relationship as the victim's roommate. The motive was being humiliated in front of everyone, and there was a money dispute. All the elements seemed to be in place. The task force believed they are close to getting their hands on the culprit. They quickly verified and learned that Cao Tupong had just returned from Doquan to Hisham Town in Marjiang district. A task force immediately set out for Ni Pham's village. As they reached the village entrance, a villager provided further information that increased their suspicions. This person said that the day before he saw Cao Tufong returning to the village, carrying a sack in his hand, and from that sack was dripping a liquid that looked like blood. This detail immediately made investigators think of the victim's missing head. It is very possible that after committing the crime, the perpetrator was so brutal that he brought the victim's head back to his hometown to dispose of it somewhere else. The police went to Cao Tufong's old house, a secluded wooden house on the edge of the village. When they arrived, they found him in the yard holding a large knife, trying to chop bones. Seeing the appearance of the stranger, he appeared a little confused but still kept a cold expression. When asked about Cao Tufam, he answered stutteringly, saying that he was not familiar with him, even though he knew that the two had been in the middle of the room. His evasive attitude only made the police more confident in their judgment. While one investigator was talking to distract Cao Tufong, another noticed a sack hanging from the rafters and drops of fresh blood were still dripping. From the sack blood sense they found the decisive evidence. The police immediately restrained Cao Tufong and carefully lowered the sack. Everyone held their breath, preparing for a horrific scene. But when the bag was opened, what they found inside was not what they were looking for. It was just a piece of fresh pork. Cao Tufong explained that he had just bought it to prepare salted meat for Tet, a local custom. Although no direct evidence was found, with suspicious behavior and clear motives, the police still decided to take Cao Tupong to headquarters to continue the investigation. However, during the interrogation and further verification of information, another surprising truth was revealed. Although Cao Tupong and the victim Cao Tufam used to live in the same room that was a few months ago, due to minor conflicts, the two are no longer together at the time of the incident. Cao Tufong had moved to another place and he had an irrefutable alibi. The landlord in Duquan, when shown Cao Tufong's photo, also seemed uncertain. He said, This person looked both similar and different from the person who had rented the room with him by this time. The biggest suspect, who seemed to have all the elements of a murderer, had once again been eliminated. The investigation again reached a deadlock. Who was the hunchback man who actually shared the same room with and murdered Cao Tufam? What is his relationship with Cao Tufang? Or is this just a strange coincidence of receiving characteristics? The task force was faced with a more difficult problem than ever. The investigations again fell into a deadlock after the suspect Cao Tufang was determined to have an alibi. The special task force of the Dongguan City Police Department faced enormous pressure. At that time it was almost Tet. People were looking forward to a peaceful Tet while a cold-blooded murderer was still at large. Deputy Director Tong Jian knew that they could not give up. He believes there must have been a mistake somewhere in the initial information gathering process. He decided to go back to the starting point of Veclu, which was the fellow countryman who had worked with the high-ranking victim at Dongguan. A working group once again met with the person who provided information about Cao Tufang being the victims. Rumored this time, the investigator squeezed on more thoroughly, requiring the witness to recall every detail precisely. And it was in this conversation that an important truth was made clear. This compatriot sadist's memory may have been faulty. Itis. True that the victim Cao Tufam lived with a fellow countryman who had a hunchback, but after thinking about it carefully, he was not sure if it was Cao Tufang or not, because in their village besides Mr. Fong there was another person who also had a hunchback. This person's nickname is Duoing De Boy, which means humpback Duoing. His real name is Duoing Quangtin. This guy is like a key that opens the final door of the case. Investigators immediately proceeded to verify the person named Duoing Quangtin. They quickly got the information. Duoing Quangtin, 33 years old, is also from Majiang district. He is characterized by a hunchback and small stature, who was also a migrant worker at the military race and knew the high-class victim very well. The two were event-related. Furthermore, according to the victim's wife, her husband did indeed live with a relative named Duong. All information points to a single object. An emergency arrest warrant was issued for Duong Quangtin. A working group immediately set off for Majiang district. When they arrived at Duong Quangtin's house, they found out he was not there. His family said his parents were divorced. His mother had remarried and was now living in another village. The hunch is that the suspect is most likely hiding at his mother's house. Our investigators did not delay and immediately moved to that village. When they arrived, they found Duong Quangtin's mother's house, and there they saw a small man with a slightly hunched back, squatting in the doorway, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. That person's Duong Quangtin. The police officers approached and saw a stranger. Duong Quangtin just looked up, his face showing no surprise or fear, but instead a strange calmness. When an investigator asked, "Do you know Cao Tufang?" Duong Quangtin was silent for a few seconds, then inserted a sentence that stunned everyone. His voice was motionless, "Killed by me." The confession was delivered easily and coldly. When asked about the victim's head, he also calmly pointed to Thurva downstream at Longmingku at the police station. Duong Quangtin confessed crimes. The motive for the cassettos, not a deep hatred or a complex conspiracy. It stems from a very simple reason. A reason that exposes human jealousy and cruel greed. Duong Quangtin and the high-class victim were not only fellow countrymen and relatives, but also roommates. But the lives of the two people are at the front. The high-class victim is healthy and hard-working, so he earns a decent amount of money every month. As for Duong Quangtin, his health is weaker and he often gets sick, so his income is very unstable, just enough to cover his daily expenses. This difference sowed a hidden jealousy in Duong Quangtin's heart. That jealousy flared up into murder on January 2nd, the day before the crime occurred. That day, Cao Shupin had just received a salary of 960 yuan. With money in hand, he happily invited a variant to go out to eat and drink. Not only that, he owed 700 yuan, a huge amount of money at that time, to buy a new cell phone. The fact that a friend and relative who was always by his side suddenly had a better life, had money to spend and buy luxury items, was like a fire burning in Duong Quangtin's heart. Jealousy and greed arose so strongly, a dark thought formed in his mind: to kill Cao Tufam to take the remaining money on this new phone. He spent the whole afternoon planning. He thought about how he could kill people in the cleanest way possible. And then on the night of the first day of the month, taking advantage of the moment when Cao Tufam was sleeping soundly, Duong Quangtin took action. The investigation was long with countless twists and turns. The suspects seemed certain, but in the end, I tended with a truth that no one could have expected. The perpetrator was Nat Samyon with a big conflict. Nor was he someone who was humiliated, but his roommate and closest relative. His motives were also extra malapity and trivial. Just because of jealousy over a new phone worth a few hundred yuan, he had the heart to attack the person who had taken care of and helped him. The truth has been revealed, but it also leaves behind a big question about human nature and the fragile line between good and evil. Duong Quangtin's confession revealed a horrifying and cruel truth. The entire course of the murder was not a complex plot or a long-standing feud, but the result of jealousy and greed that came to a head in a single afternoon at the police station. He recounted all his crimes in detail on the afternoon of May 2, 2010. After victim Cao Tupam received his wages and bought a new mobile phone, the two had an hour together. Throughout the meal, the image of the new phone and then early 1,000 yuan the victim had just received kept haunting Yang Guangxing's mind. He thought about the difference between himself and his relative. Both were people from the countryside who came to the city to work, but Cao Tupam was healthy and earned a lot of money, while he was sick and weak, with an income that was only enough to get by. Jealousy and a dark thought began to sprout, to kill Cao Tupam, to take all the money and that phone. That idea grew and became a concrete plan. Had decided to attack at night when Theodocton was fast asleep and unable to defend himself. On the night of the first day of the month, in the small rented room, after making sure Cao Tupam was fast asleep, Yuan Guangtin quietly took out the knife he often used in daily life without hesitation. He stabbed his roommate in the chest with the knife. Relatives called to bring him in after committing the crime, facing the victim's body, Yuan Guangtin again, to carry out the next step in his plan. To make identification difficult and prolong the investigation, he committed an extremely barbaric act. He used a knife to cut the victim's head off his body. He then tied the victim's hands together and placed the headless body in a white woven sack. He took the remaining money and the victim's new phone. At about 2 a.m. on the 4th of May, he pushed his bicycle alone, carrying a heavy sack containing the body, out of the boarding house. He walked nearly 2 kilometers in the dark to reach Therenberg. Here, he threw the sack into the river to find it. The victim's head, along with the knife and bloody clothes, were put into another sack and thrown at another location in the lower river, which was the Longmen port area. After getting rid of everything, he returned to his room and spent hours cleaning up all the bloodstains, trying to erase all traces of the crime. The next morning, he packed his luggage and took a bus back home, as if nothing had happened. Based on Yang Guangxing's testimony, the police returned to the Longmenku area, and after a period of searching, they found the victim's head. The case could have been closed with sufficient evidence, and confession. News of Yang Guangxing's arrest caused a huge stir in his hometown. No one could believe that a man with a taciturn and quiet appearance could commit such a terrible crime. Yang Guangxing's father, an old and poor farmer, was extremely hurt and ashamed after learning of his son's crime. He felt sorry for the victim's family. Even though his house was worthless, he still tried to borrow 200 yuan plus a pig from his house to bring to the family of Theskala to apologize on behalf of his unfilial son. The old man's actions made the tragedy of the case even more bitter. One man's crime caused pain to 3 families, with the act of intentional murder with extra-mile cruel and barbaric methods, only because of greed. Angela C. Duan Guangtin was later sentenced to death by the People's Court of Duquan Sitiant, was executed. This case is a valuable lesson about human nature. The noble victim, with his enthusiastic and kind heart, always helped and took care of his relatives and fellow countrymen during difficult days in a foreign land. But he could not have imagined that his kindness would not be reciprocated, but instead became the target of jealousy and greed from the one he trusted. The story is a bitter reminder of the old saying, "The intention to harm others is impossible. The intention to prevent others is impossible." It means that one must not have the heart to harm others, but one must have the heart to be wary of others. Sometimes evil comes from where we least expect it. It never hurts to be vigilant, even with those closest to us. Hopefully today's case has provided you with useful information and moments of reflection. Well, that concludes the story for today. Well, look forward to receiving your comments. If you like our videos, please click like and subscribe to the channel to follow the next mysterious stories.